big hero adjustments and item updates.
Hey guys, what's up? Today let's check out the latest update on Advanced Server.
And it features the experimental adjustments on Lunox, Sun, Badang, Argus, and Cyclops. Skypiercer, Malefic gun, and more are also included in the patch. First up, we have the experimental adjustment on Lunox, where they made her easier to play. Honestly, easier is an understatement because they removed the mechanic of switching between light and dark state. And here's how they did it. First is they removed the old third skill. Next, they separated the dark and light ultimate button. That means you can now use any ultimate without the need to switch states. As you can see, I can now use the two ultimates consecutively. I don't need to switch anymore. Next change is the cooldown sharing of her skills. Now that you only have one state, her first and second skill now have a separate cooldown timer. Cool, right? All you need to do now is press any skill that you like. No more complicated combos to memorize. Moving on, there are some slight changes to her mechanics. Using her Dark Ultimate prevents you to use the first skill Light version. As you can see, it's blocked until the ultimate duration is finished. Similarly, it applies to her Light Ultimate. During this state, the Dark second skill is blocked, but her first skill is not. That means you can spam the skill while in her Light Ultimate state. This should allow you to heal nicely during her invincibility. And that's pretty much it for Lunox's experimental adjustment. Remember, this is labeled as experimental, which means there's a chance it won't get applied on official server. She became easier to use, perfect for beginners. Next, we have the experimental adjustment on Badang. The developer said his knockback effect on every fourth basic attack does not align well with his combo style. To fix this, they are making the following adjustment. They are removing the knockback effect on his basic attack. As you can see, it's no longer working. The stun on his passive is now longer from 0.6 to 0.8 seconds. This should make escaping harder during his combo. Next, his first skill now deals more damage. Same for his ultimate, where they increase its attack scaling. However, the attack effects is lowered from 100 down to 66%. And lastly, his second skill dash is now faster by 33%. So with these adjustments, Badang's build should favor burst type instead of attack speed. He should now focus on raw attack and cooldown reduction to make his combos more effective. No more stun lock though. So what can our Badang players say about this adjustment? Next, we have the experimental adjustment on Sun. His ultimate can now summon a clone behind an enemy hero, and the enemy will be petrified for 0.8 seconds. This should make catching enemies easier, and you no longer need the Petrify spell. The downside is that you need a hero to cast this skill. It doesn't work on minions, jungle creeps, lord, and turtle. This means you can only use it when there's an enemy hero nearby. It will be harder to solo push towers or take down objectives with only his clones. And you also lost the ability to become untargetable when casting his ultimate. Part of the adjustment is his passive, where they lowered the maximum stacks from 10 down to 5. To balance, they increased the defense reduction stack to 5%. Basically, it now requires fewer basic attacks to reach the maximum stacks, but in exchange, the limit is now lower. Next, we have his third skill, whose damage is increased, but they've added 2 seconds of cooldown. His HP stats is also nerfed with lower base and growth. Overall, this should improve Sun's early and mid-game ability to get kills. The downside, pushing and objective takedowns will be harder now that you've lost the ability to use his ultimate on his own. Remember, these are still labeled as experimental adjustments. If you don't like it, you can let the developers know in the comment section. I believe they also review feedbacks on videos like this. Now let's talk about Argus, whose experimental adjustments have returned. Just like before, here are his changes. He will no longer gain energy over time, but in exchange, he gets more when doing basic attacks and dealing critical damage. Passive damage is better in the early game, but weaker in the later stages. Skill 2 will give 100 energy, and you can keep the excess for the next basic attack. The ultimate duration will extend if he takes fatal damage. However, I don't think it's implemented on advanced server yet, because the skills are still for the current Argus. Moving on, we have the return of Cyclops' experimental adjustments. Ultimate is now faster and cooldown is shorter. In exchange, the damage is weakened as well as its immobilized time. Second skill now has a bigger range. In return, the damage is slightly lowered. Next, we have the adjustment on the Airborne crowd control effect. As you all know, most crowd control effects can be affected by resilience except for Airborne and suppression. And since suppression is less common, Airborne has become slightly overused. To balance, they will reduce the duration of Airborne on several heroes. Here are the list of heroes whose Airborne duration is shortened. Tigreal's second skill, Vexana's ultimate, Gatot-Kacha's ultimate, Grox's ultimate, Leslie's second skill, Martis's second skill, Kofra's first skill, Yuzong's third skill, Edith's first skill, Julian's and Han's third skill. Meanwhile, Chief's second skill is downgraded to stun, and you can no longer cancel Odette's ultimate with this skill. Guinevere will have a shorter airborne duration, but her second skill range is now longer. Vale will have a shorter airborne on his second skill, but in exchange his ultimate will explode faster, and it will also have a stronger pull effect. Kadita, whose combo is based on her second skill, will have some adjustments as well. First skill movement is now faster. Airborne duration on her second skill is down to 1 second, but the force swing of the skill is cut short by 50%. Same for her ultimate, whose animation is now faster by 15%. They made these changes so that it doesn't affect their combos too much. The developers also said they will be more cautious implementing airborne effects in the future. Next, we have a nerf on Clint. Now that his attack animations are faster, they had to tone down his first skill damage for balance in the early game. If you remember last week, his combos are faster and his second skill now has a longer dash. Next is the return of Joy's experimental adjustments. The interval of her second skill is shorter, from 1 second down to 0.8. It's a way to reduce her damage time in the hopes of increasing her burst capability. Next is Chang'e. The developer said she has significantly improved with last week's skill adjustment. To compensate for the lost mobility, she now gains more HP and base movement speed. Next is the revamped Hanzo. He now gains energy when an enemy unit dies near him during his ultimate stage. That's 2 energy from a non-hero unit, while 20 when a hero dies. Now let's check the item section. First is Sky Piercer. The HP threshold is now a flat number instead of percentage. So at minimum stacks, the enemy will die if their HP is below 180 instead of the old 4% max HP. Meanwhile, at max stacks, the enemy will die if their HP is below 500. That means tanks will have a better chance surviving against a Sky Piercer user because of their high HP. On the current version, high HP heroes are easily killed since it's percentage based. So finally some good news for our tank players. Next is the big adjustment on Malefic gun. It now provides a fixed 15% extra basic attack range. That means you no longer need to land a skill to activate it, and there's no cooldown. It immediately adds extra basic attack range once you buy the item. Then it also has a new stat where it gives 30% physical penetration. Crazy, right? It's a game changer for some heroes. However, there's a note that this effect cannot stack with the penetration of Malefic Roar. Anyway, to balance the item, they had to adjust the stats. Lifesteal is removed, while physical attack and attack speed are lowered. Overall, this should improve some of the not-so-popular heroes we have right now. Next is the item Malefic Roar. It now gives 30% physical penetration instead of 20. To balance, the penetration limit on its unique passive is lowered from 40 down to 30. That means it should deal more damage against heroes with fewer physical defense. Next, we have Wind Talker. Its critical chance stat is increased from 10 to 20%. In exchange, they remove the plus 20 physical attack, so better critical chance, but it now has 0 physical attack. Next, we have the Regen spell. It will now give 18% max mana instead of 9. This should be an indirect buff on mana-dependent heroes like Zushin, Sicilian, and Alice. Last, we have the HP adjustments on all heroes. The starting HP of all heroes are getting reduced, but in return, the HP growth is increased. And this is in line with the Marksman HP adjustment from the previous patch. This aims to narrow the early game gap with the Marksman class. And that's it for our weekly advanced server update. It's a big one, especially the item part where it can affect many heroes. So what can you say about the patch? Do you like the adjustments on Sun, Lunox, and Badang? Share your thoughts in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.